This is the STEELDIVE 1970. So this just came in straight from Aliexpress. Takes about a month to a month and a half to show up. So I'm gonna slice it open and we can take a look. They do not skimp on the tape. There it is, a STEELDIVE case. Hard plastic case, probably reusable. A lot of stuff that comes from Aliexpress comes in these little snap cases. So, snap on every side. Some foam padding, and what do we have? Comes with user manual. STEELDIVE International Warranty card, completely blank, so useless. Not that I was going to use it anyway. Some more bubble wrap. And in the plastic bag, we have our STEELDIVE. Aliexpress and China love to completely encase the watches in plastic. It's nice because then they don't scratch on the way here, but it's also something that I now have to remove. So we're going to get this sized and all the plastic off, and we'll come back and take a look. Okay, we're back, and although it's been seconds for you, it has been a week for me, and so I should be able to give you guys a good review of how this thing wears on a daily basis, and also give you the kind of rundown here. Before I start, if you guys could like and subscribe, it really helps the channel, and I appreciate it a lot. Also, any comments are welcome down in the comments section. So this guy, now all plastics are off, and I can give you a quick look here. Completely brushed, which is great for a tool watch, but you can see all of the reflections here. I did replace the clasp, so this is the original clasp on this watch. It's branded, double branded, STEELDIVE there, and then the logo. It is a pressed clasp, and I learned from Jody on Just One More Watch that you can get the milled clasp, which is exactly the same size and essentially the same clasp with the exception of this deployant piece here, for about $8 on Aliexpress. So that's what I did. Alright, so we can start with the dial. So you can see here on the inside there are the hour indices followed by a minute tracker on the outside, and then a chapter ring that sits between the dial and the crystal. It is like this very matte black, and it kind of disappears, which is really nice. You don't quite see it unless you're looking for it, but if you give the watch a good angle here, you can see it sits right in there, and then that pushes out to the bezel. You can either get a branded or an unbranded watch, and so you can see here, obviously I've gone for the branded one. I actually like the STEELDIVE logo. I think a lot of people think it's ugly or it's just kind of busy, but I like the way it looks. I think it makes the watch look a little more balanced, and so that's what I did. I went with the option for the logo, and if you look, you can see the lume. So each of these markers is luminescent. The hands are luminescent as well, and then the bezel. The lume on the markers is slightly yellowed. It's not quite green. It's definitely slightly yellowed. The lume on the dial is C3. The lume on the hands, you can see, is a slight differentiation in tone. It's still C3, but it looks a little different. That might be because it's an unsupported hand, so there's lume in there, but there's nothing underneath it, unlike the indices on the dial. But it does you'll see in the Lume shot, it does glow a little differently as well. So I don't know if they have a different handset Lume from the dial Lume, but it's noticeable. So there you can see it. There's those 3 different colors or tones of Lume. The bezel itself being BGW9, and the indices and hour hands being C3. But those hour hands look like they are just a lighter or a more blue C3 than the indices are. And I would suspect that is because they source these parts from all different factories and then assemble them. They're not necessarily built under the same rules, and so you get 3 different colors. It's a really strong glow. It's really easy to see. You guys can see right there. It's pretty bright, especially the bezel is pretty bright. I have a preference for BGW9. Just for comparison here, that is a Pelagos, so you can see that blue color is matching, and then this is a Seiko Baby Tuna, and so the 3 of them together, not much beats a Pelagos. And looking at them at their initial brightness, I wouldn't say that the STEELDIVE beats the Pelagos or even the Seiko, but again, Jody from Just One More Watch did a Lume Wars where he did these things over, I think, 40 minutes he gave it, and that STEELDIVE won Lume Wars. So over time, you might see that this STEELDIVE does last longer with its glow, but I think it's pretty tight. Even so, the watches on either side of it are far more expensive, and so for its cost, it is a real winner. You've got your date aperture at 3 o'clock, which is a white date, which does balance well against the indices at the 9 o'clock. And so these are all applied, and that's nice. They're not printed. They are applied indices. And down at 6 o'clock, you can see automatic water 200 meter resist. And so this is to copy the watch. This is essentially, it is an homage of, which is the Captain Willard. The Seiko 61058110, I think, is the right designation for the original watch that this is a copy of. There's a new Captain Willard by Seiko, different designation. I think that one's the SPB 151, and there's colors, so they changed the number at the end, so it's like a 153 and a couple other options. And Seiko's remade this watch a couple times at different price points with different finishing. They did like a Grand Seiko Movement one, which was much more expensive and limited. All of those are vastly more expensive than this watch, and so you are getting the design of a Seiko, which is the same dial layout, that same exact text as the Seiko, at just a crazy cheap price for the quality that we're getting here. The handset, stick hands brushed with a stoplight second hand. That second hand is also loomed, although just the white part, not the red part. And it's a decent amount of lume on there. So from the chapter ring, you push out to the bezel. The bezel is a ceramic bezel. It is a fully loomed ceramic bezel that sits in a stainless steel bezel enclosure, actually, the actual metal component of the bezel. And it is a coined edge bezel, and I think it looks fantastic. The coin edging is usually my favorite of all the bezel types. Now this one is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and it does line up, unlike much of the Seikos that you'll get there. So Seiko is notorious for having not the best quality control. This is essentially $100 watch, depending on when you get it. If you get it on sale, I ended up getting it for around $90 during the winter sale. This one does line up. So you've got your 12 o'clock marker, and then that 60-minute marker there, and then your 60-minute marker or 12 o'clock marker for your dive bezel, and they all line up. The action is good, definitely better than you would expect for the price point. It's a little lighter than I prefer. That's just my taste. I like bezels to be a little more difficult to turn, but you know, if I was really concerned about it, I'm sure I could pop this bezel off, put a thicker gasket on it, make it a little more difficult to turn. But the fact that it lines up is just phenomenal. This is an issue with watches that are far more expensive than the base model Seikos that you get that have alignment issues. I've said this before in my videos, but my Pelagos doesn't line up perfectly. And when you're in that price point, everything should be perfect. So score 1 for cheap Chinese watches. The case, like I said before, this is a Captain Willard, homage. I mean, it's essentially a knockoff. So you get a really great Seiko case design. It's got a pretty short lug to lug. So we're looking at 43.8 across here, although depending on how you measure it, because there are some big crown guards. So 43.8 across, and you've got a 46.8 lug to lug, and that is a good size. Anything 46, 47 is really comfortable, and this is one of the measurements that really matters when it comes to a watch's comfort, especially for varying sizes of wrists. This measurement being smaller usually makes the watch more comfortable, even if it's wider on the width measurements. As far as thickness is concerned, 13.5. That's a good place to be at, especially for a cheap watch. You can see here circular brushing all around, and then it kind of has this beveling that you can see right there. It cuts in, and this aids in the comfort of the watch. So high polish there, high polish there. That's really nice for a cheap watch, because if you end up scratching underneath there, high polish is easy to fix. The brushing, much more difficult to fix, and at something in this price range, you wouldn't have it fixed. Those crown guards, so they are at the 4 o'clock position, and they are really out of the way. I mean, you can see here at the bottom of this case, it kind of just melds out from the lugs on this side, and then you get a little one that pops out here. But the crown is nearly completely recessed in there, but it is not difficult to grip. And so you can get a good grip on this. It's got a good amount of kind of gnarling on the crown, although it is spaced. I don't know if you can see that very clearly, but it is spaced a little oddly. So you've got kind of a coining and then a flat spot, and then a coining and then a flat spot. So a little odd on the design, but it's still easy to grab. And that's kind of nice. Moving around to the case back. The case back on the body of the case is fully brushed, and then the actual case back itself is a mix of polish and sand blasting or bead blasting, with an etched logo in relief there, and that looks pretty good. I will say that initially this bothered me a little bit because it was so sharply etched that I could feel it kind of cutting against the back of my wrist. And it seems to have gone away now that it's got a decent amount of my skin stuck inside that etching, but that was just something that stuck out to me here. So solid case back, and around the case back edges you've got your standard information. So 200 meters water resistant by STEELDIVE, all stainless steel, automatic movement, NH35. It actually drops that name on there. So that's another part of this watch, is it's running an NH35. That's a Seiko movement. It's essentially the 4R35, 4R36 movement, depending on if you have a day and date or just a date, that Seiko's putting in way, way more expensive watches. It's super reliable. Essentially, if it goes bad, you just toss it, you put another one in there. There's lots of modifications available for an NH35. It's one of the more moddable movements, so you can get different dials, different handsets that fit at different day dates. All of that really cheaply available. You can get it from just a ton of different websites. It's not an accurate movement as far as movements are concerned. So it's minus 20 plus 40 a day, which is it's not a great accuracy. But again, price point, you can find the NH35 in much, much, much more expensive watches from Seiko or outside other micro brands, and this thing, having it, is a big plus. I did skip this earlier, but that crystal, which is super reflective, supposedly has anti-reflective coating, and you can actually see it. That blue flash, that kind of shine there is the anti-reflective coating. All this reflection is just coming from the windows in my house, but you should, and there's a little bit of blue, but you should be happy that it's a sapphire crystal. So sapphire crystal, ceramic insert in the bezel, NH35 Seiko movement in a sub $100 watch, as long as you keep your eye out and look for the sales. These are great specs. 200 meters, water resistant. I'm sure they don't test each one. It's not ISO certified, but if you're not a diver, this is probably way more than you need for your daily life. So good marks all around for the STEELDIVE. Now, the bracelet is an oyster style bracelet. It is push pins, and you would expect that from a cheap watch, but the push pins are pretty good. They're pretty easy to get in and out. Like I said earlier, I did replace the clasp, but it's essentially the same clasp with a slightly different deployant portion. And so still 3 micro adjusts. It's this is a great clasp. I like this one, but if you're not going to swap it, here is the stamped metal one. I do really like the double signing of that clasp. And even so, this clasp, well, really actually this one comes on watches that are far, far more expensive as well. So you're not doing so bad here. It is a little stiff when you get it, and it is a little sharp on the inside. So it's not something that's going to come across in video, but these edges right here along the links, they're a little sharp. And the sharpest component of this is actually this little tab here. So these are solid end links, but the tabs that hold the end links in are not finished well. And so I've even thought about maybe just dulling it down, just so that it doesn't catch on my wrist as much. Overall though, great bracelet. It can use a little lubrication to make it silky like this. So whenever I get a cheap bracelet, I do essentially soak it in lubricant and then dry it off. I use Rock and Roll, which is a chain lubricant for bikes. So it's really made for, it to get really beat up, and so it's overkill for a watch, but it's a super lightweight lubricant, and it's easy to clean off and doesn't kind of leak out onto you afterwards. So that's what I do with any kind of stiff, cheap bracelet, and now buttery smooth after a few days of wear. So let's do the function of this watch. So if we unscrew our crown, super smooth for the price point. It's not the smoothest teeth on a crown that I've ever found, but nice for the price point. First position is your date, and so there it is. It changes. I will say the date wheel in mine is very slightly off, so if you see there, it sits a little higher up in the date window than you would kind of want for it to be centered, but it's all a matter of price point. So you can clearly see what date it is, so it really shouldn't be an issue. Next position is the time. Because it's in NH35, it is a hacking movement. It's also hand winding, so the first position you can hand wind this. It sets smoothly, so operation is good. Doesn't move too quickly, doesn't move too slowly. I will say though that the date change, like all NH35s, starts around 10 o'clock. You can see there. And finishes a little early, so you can see it's maybe about 5 minutes before midnight that it flips over. Not so bad. Man, the combo between the hands and the matte black dial and the matte black chapter ring and then the shiny ceramic bezel is something funky. I feel like the only thing that they can do to make this watch better is to give you a matte ceramic finish to just give it more of that tool watch look because of the sapphire being so reflective and shiny, and because of the ceramic bezel insert being so shiny. It's kind of a little off for a tool watch like this. It doesn't sit quite right, but it still looks really good. And I don't think that you can capture how good this watch looks in video. You really do need to see it in person. I'll drop in some daylight shots here so you can see what it looks like outside, but this thing just catches the light in some really spectacular ways. And that crystal also is nearly flat. I mean, it's a flat crystal, but you see there's a little tiny edge there that pops up above the sapphire or above the ceramic. And so you get just this little bits of reflection from the edges of the crystal as well, and it adds to that kind of like glimmer that the watch gives off. So there's a wrist shot. It is comfortable, sits well. I have about a 7-inch wrist, or 18 centimeters, and you can see there's plenty of room. There's no overhang. It's a great wearing, great fitting watch. I would say that this thing does a really good job competing with the new Turtles, and I think that's actually its closer rival, or it's what it's really out there fighting against, because it's not really a comparison in price range with a Captain Willard. Those are $1,000. It is Turtle-like with this cushion case. So if you were looking to get a Turtle, you should maybe take a look at these STEELDIVEs and save yourself, $300, $400, $500, depending on the model you're looking at. The regular Turtle, the SRP 777, those are, if you're lucky, $250 to maybe $400. If you're looking for the SRP E03, those are the King Turtles with the equivalent sapphire and ceramic. Those are $4, $5, $6, depending on the model you're looking for. So, I don't think that those are 6 times the watch. If you want the name Seiko on your watch, then that's what you're paying for. But this is a great little budget diver, and when it stops working, you can toss it and get a different color. They come in green, they come in blue, they come on rubber, they come on the stainless steel. For me, I'd always get the bracelet, because you can put anything on a 20 millimeter lug width, and that's what this is. This is 20 millimeters here, so wide variety of straps and bracelets available to you. If you don't like this, I've seen these on Uncle Seiko razor wires, which are phenomenally comfortable, difficult to size, but just really great watch bracelets if you are looking to swap it out, although they cost about as much as a watch. So I'll leave links for this watch, where I got it, and also the Clasp, and then I guess I'll throw the Uncle Seiko stuff in there, so you can have a look at all of it. Let's do one more overview here. That all brushed bracelet. With that male first link, so the end links are female end links, and that allows it to really drape straight down. So even if you have 6.5, maybe even 6.25 inch wrists on these things, it's just going to be crazy comfortable. I didn't mention this before, but that is difficult to see, but it is a signed crown, which is a nice thing there. Signed STEELDIVE logo crown. So I'll throw up some stats here, and feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. I know that a lot of people don't like homages. I know that people don't like these kind of, you could even call it a knockoff watch. But on the flip side, they're doing some things for the price point that not even Seiko is doing, and they're paying Seiko for the movements. So it's a win for Seiko, and it's a win for you if you pick this thing up. I will say the shipment times on these from China are exceedingly long, 1 to 2 months for the US, maybe even longer for the UK. But a lot of European countries have people that can buy it from in country or in Europe to make it a bit quicker. Thanks for watching.